Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, but not good night. The intention of this video is to compare B2 and C1 use of English, part 4, transformational sentences. The best way to explain it is using real exams provided by Cambridge's official website, including its answers. The most important difference that we may notice from the very beginning is the length of the sentences. E2 are shorter and you have to write from 3 to 5 words. However, C1s are longer, having to write from 3 to 6 words. And as always, B2 uses basic grammatical rules and C1 are more complex. Let's have a look at the passive, as this grammatical structure appears in both B2 and C1. In B2, the band is said to be planning. It is the typical passive structure that we learn when we first study impersonal passive. In C1, instead of said, alleged is used, and also the grammatical structure is more complex because it is using a perfect tense. So, is alleged to have damaged. Instead of is said to damage, that would be said in a B2. C1, there is another example of a passive, number 30, withdrew, and it is was withdrawn. Why is there no complex structural change in this passive? Well, because there are two changes, passive and a fixed expression. This expression is implied by the keyword given, light. This idea can also be explained with the conditionals. This C1 conditional, they are using the third, had been, would have finished. They are using the typical conditional structure that appears in B2. First, second, or third. Why? Because there is another change. Without Joe's help. If it had not been for Joe's help, for Joe's. That's the second change. If this sentence would have required only a conditional change, then it would have been a mixed conditional. So in this case, we would be paying more attention to the meaning than the grammatical structure. Related to fixed expressions, B2 are simpler. A good idea, 2. A long time. Grammatical structure that follows the fixed expression I would rather. I'm being a negative. I would rather not. One we have already mentioned, in the light of, and it makes no, or it makes little, or it makes very little difference to me. Even though there's only 2, but C1 is well known for the use of fixed expressions in transformational sentences. So there's a long list that has to be studied. Let's pay attention to 25, which is also a conditional, and is using the first conditional, give, will be. Why are they using a basic conditional structure? Because there are 2 changes, and it is the collocation, give a explanation. However, you do not only have to say give a explanation, but it's telling you that you've got to use explain, explanation, and clearly, which is an adverb, changes into an adjective. So there are also word formation changes. So that's why, as long as you explain the process clearly, it is if you give a clear explanation of the process or about the process. In this B2, in 28, there are also 2 changes. I knocked for ages. I spent a long time knocking. But comparing it to C1, they are much more simpler. In 27, we have the typical question in reported speech. In 30, we have the verb call off, which means cancel, which is typical in B2, as put off, meaning postpone. Hope I've helped you understand the difference between B2 and C1 transformational sentences. B2 consisting of basic grammatical rules as passive, conditionals, reported, familiar vocabulary used daily. However, the complexity of these basic grammatical rules increase, and vocabulary is much more formal. In C1, if it is required a basic grammatical change, then it's because there are 2 or 3 changes that have to be paid attention to in order to carry it out correctly. Remember, the way to dominate this exercise is always through practice and technique. Bye bye.